Hey everybody, this is Brian with Bear Cards 34, back with another edition of Show and Tell for 1989 Topps and Friends. This is where I take a deep dive into the 1989 Topps set, as well as some of the other card companies, which would be most notably Pro Set and Score, that came out in 1989. So here we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll start off with their team card, which during the year these cards came out in 1989, the Steelers went 9-7. They won their wild card game versus the Oilers, but then lost to Denver in the divisional round. And on the left there, you'll see Chuck Noll. This is his Pro Set card. There were actually two Pro Set cards. He had his original, which was an error, where it mentions he's one of only 3 current NFL head coaches to lead the same team for 20 consecutive years. That was corrected with one of only 2 current coaches. So again, that's another example of Pro Set making some changes as the year went along, which they did quite a bit of. And on the right there, that's Louis Lipps. He was the team MVP for 1989. A pretty good receiver. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler. And I believe I may have shown this in the first video, but Terry Bradshaw also had a card, with the Steelers Pro Set for being an announcer. So the first card we'll show here will be Bubby Brister. This is his rookie card. He also had rookie cards for Score and also for Pro Set. So Bubby Brister was a 3rd-round pick back in 1986 out of Northeast Louisiana. He actually was drafted after his high school career by the Detroit Tigers, and he did play 1 season in the minors for the Bristol Tigers before starting his college football career. Now, of note, Terry Bradshaw was also from Louisiana, and sometimes they, probably unfairly had some comparisons initially when he first went there. Now, Bubby Brister was a backup to Mark Malone for 2 years, and then he won a 3-way battle in 1988 to win the starting spot against Todd Blackledge, and then Steve Bono, who went on to have a really good career as a backup and occasionally as a starter. And he ended up doing really well with the Steelers for 3 years, Bubby Brister did, including an 89-yard touchdown to our guy right here, Louis Lipps, which was one of his signature plays, really. 1989 was probably Brister's best year. He actually set a team record for the most consecutive passes without an interception. In 1991, some injuries led to a competition with Neil O'Donnell, and O'Donnell eventually won the starting job. So after 7 years with the Steelers, Brister went on to be a backup quarterback, playing for a lot of teams, the Eagles, the Jets, the Broncos, where he was a backup to Elway and won 2 Super Bowls there in Denver. And he finished out his career with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, in Denver, in 1998, John Elway was injured, and Brister came in for 4 games and went 4-0. So he was a really critical part of that team in 98, making sure that they had the seeding in the playoffs. So, he was a decent quarterback in the NFL. Next up, we've got Tunch Ilkin. I mentioned him previously in a TTM throwback video. I wrote to him as a kid, and he sent back some autographs for me. He actually is a really good offensive tackle. He had a really good career, 6th-round draft pick in 1980 out of Indiana State. Born in Istanbul, Turkey, and he had a 14-year career. He did spend 1993 with the Packers, but most notably was with the Steelers, where he's part of the Steelers Hall of Honor and the Steelers all-time team. He made 2 Pro Bowls, and he had a pretty successful broadcasting career after the NFL. Unfortunately, he passed away in June of last year, 2021, from ALS. And then next up, we've got Merrill Hodge. He actually, his final year was with the Chicago Bears, but he had a few really good years as a running back for the Steelers and a fullback. He played quite a bit of fullback as well. I know a lot of people later on knew him as an analyst for ESPN. He was there for over a decade, but originally started off as a 10th-round draft pick in 1987 out of Idaho State. And he set a then NCAA record for 5,400 all-purpose yards. He spent 8 seasons in the NFL, And I remember his son was a backup quarterback at BYU a few years ago. But anyway, Hodge ended his career with over 3,100 rushing yards, 2,100 receiving yards, and 34 touchdowns. 1988, he had over 700 yards rushing. And in 1990, he scored 10 touchdowns. So pretty good part of the late 80s, early 90s Steelers teams. Next up, we have one of the greatest defensive backs, one of the best cornerbacks in NFL history, Rod Woodson. Unbelievably, he was a 10th, not a 10th, he was a number 10 pick in 1987 and played for many, many years. I think it was like 17 seasons. Just, that's incredible as a cornerback. And there's another guy who I'll mention in a minute here who played about that long as well. And I think a big part of the reason he was able to play that long is his athleticism and his speed. He was just faster than pretty much everybody else. So he played at Purdue in college, where he was an All-American in 1985 and 86. And also an All-American not only as a defensive back, but as a return specialist his final year. And he was very successful at track and field. And at Purdue, he was a two-time All-American in track and field as well. And he held the NCAA 60-meter hurdles record for a decade. He also once qualified for the Olympic trials in the 110-meter hurdles, but he chose to continue his football career instead. So when he was drafted in 87, along with, a strike-shortened season, he also held out because of a contract dispute. And while he held out, he ran track. And during that time, he had the fourth highest 110-meter hurdle time in the world and won a bronze medal in 87 at the U.S. Olympic Festival. So again, just a super fast guy. What's kind of funny, though, is that as fast as he was, in 1988, he competed in the fastest man competition in the NFL, and he came up in second place to this guy, Darrell Green, who, again, he's another guy who, as a cornerback, ended up spending almost 2 decades playing at a high level of football in the NFL. So anyway, he was able to work out a contract, and his first game was on November 8th of 1987, and he had his first career interception 2 weeks later versus Boomer Esiason, which he ran back for 45 yards for a touchdown, and then from then on, he was on his way to a Hall of Fame career. So in those 17 years, he played a decade for the Steelers, and then he played a little bit with the 49ers, then the Ravens, where he won a Super Bowl, and finished things off with the Raiders. He was a 6-time first-team All-Pro, 3-time second-team All-Pro. He made it to 11 Pro Bowls, and twice was the interception leader. He's part of the 100th anniversary team. In 1993, that may have been his best season. He was the Defensive Player of the Year. And when he retired, he had over 1,000 tackles, 71 interceptions, with 1,400 interception return yards, which is second all-time. He also had 12 interception returns for touchdowns. He had 32 fumble recoveries, one of which he scored a touchdown on. And he also had almost 5,000 yards in kickoff returns, over 2,300 yards in punt returns, 4 return touchdowns. Just one of the great players of all time, and certainly in my lifetime. So it's kind of hard to follow Rod Woodson, but one of his defensive teammates was Carnell Lake, and this is his rookie card. He was a second-round draft pick out of UCLA in 1989, and he was a member of the 90s All-Decade team, so he, in no means was he a slouch. He was a very, very good player. I always really liked that he was also born in Salt Lake City, Utah, just like me. I thought that was pretty cool. Now, I will say, he ended up being a 5-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler, 1989 All-Rookie team, and he's part of the Steelers Hall of Honor. But when he was first drafted, Mel Kiper called that draft selection a reach. So anyway, you just never know how things are going to go. Some people seem like a surefire bet, and other ones kind of get some negative press, but then turn out to be great. And Carnell Lake certainly was an example of that. Next up, we've got Greg Lloyd. This is his rookie card. He only had the one. He was actually drafted in the 6th round back in 1987, but his first card came out in 1989. He grew up in poverty. He never knew his father. He overcame quite a bit, and he got into football at a very young age. I think he was like 6 or 7, and it was a way for him to kind of escape from all of that. He played at Fort Valley State in Georgia and had a really good career there. So he did get drafted in 87 and spent 11 years with the Steelers and then 1998 with the Panthers. He wasn't even invited to the NFL scouting combine, so Steelers scouts saw a videotape of Lloyd and they were impressed enough with his ability to play sideline to sideline that they ended up taking a closer look at him and then selected him. He was the 28th linebacker chosen in 1987 and ended up having just such a good career. He made 5 Pro Bowls, 3-time All-Pro, 2 times he led the NFL in forced fumbles, and he's also a member of the Steelers Hall of Honor. A knee injury kept him out of most of his rookie season, but then he really turned things on after that. Briefly, I want to mention Hardy Nickerson. This is his rookie card. He was a 5th-round pick, also back in 87 like Lloyd. He was out of Cal. He played with 4 teams over his 16-year career, but he's best known for his time with the Buccaneers, where he was a 4-time All-Pro. 2 of those were first team, and he made the Pro Bowl 5 times. His son, Hardy Jr., played for the Bengals and Vikings, and Hardy is a member of the All-90s team, and he was a linebackers coach for the Bears like 15 years ago for a brief time as well. So anyway, very good player, Hardy Nickerson. If you follow my channel, you know I'm a big fan of Derrick Dawson. He is a Hall of Fame center and was just a great, great player. He wrote me a really thoughtful, detailed letter when I was a kid, so I was a big fan of his after that. But Derrick Dawson was a 2nd-round pick in 88 out of Kentucky, and he had a bad experience in 9th grade playing football, so he chose not to play his sophomore year in high school. But he was just so big. You know, he was a 6'2", 270. His coach realized that, this guy needed to be on the field, and so he was heavily recruited, and the coach convinced him to play his junior year, and he became an all-state tackle. He played guard and center at Kentucky, but mostly was a center in the NFL. He made it to 7 Pro Bowls, was a 6-time first-team All-Pro, part of the 90s All-Decade team, part of the Steelers All-Time team, and like I said, a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So just a great player, Derrick Dawson. All right, next up we've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In 1989, the year these cards came out, they went 5-11. Their late Ray Perkins was the head coach. He actually played wide receiver for the Baltimore Colts back in the day. It was a tough season for the Buccaneers, but they did have some talented players. Now, one thing I wanted to make note of was this card right here. This is a Ron Hall rookie card, the late Ron Hall. He passed away back in 07, but he was... this is what's interesting. So this is not Ron Hall. This is Ron Hall right here. Now, if you'll look, they're both number 82, and so if you turn this card around, that's not Ron Hall, but that is Ron Hall. Okay, so what I was able to find out was on Trading Card Database, they mentioned that the error card here is of a player named Jerry Bell, who was a tight end. He was also number 82. However, Jerry Bell played from 1982 to 1986, whereas Ron Hall was drafted in 1987. So what obviously happened here was Score took an older photo of a player on the Buccaneers, 82, thinking it was Ron Hall, but they did end up correcting that card. Next up, we've got Lars Tate. This is his rookie card. I actually pulled his card in a pack opening earlier on this series and mentioned him. He had one of my favorite runs of the night well, I guess it would have been the 80s. 80s, 90s, but it was a great, great run where he flipped over the line, landed on his feet, and ran in for a touchdown. During his rookie season, he actually had a 100-yard game versus the Lions, and he led NFL rookies with 8 touchdowns. 7 were rushing, 1 receiving as a rookie, and he led the NFL for rookies with rushing yards. He had 467. So he had a nice little start to his career. And he had 8 more touchdowns in 1989 and a receiving touchdown. But anyway, the Buccaneers still released him in 1990. He then went on to the Chicago Bears. He only played a few games with them, and then he had a career-threatening neck injury and never played again. And I actually just found out he passed away, unfortunately, earlier this month on August 2nd of 2022. So sad to hear about that. The Buccaneers had a couple of talented wide receivers who had rookie cards in 1989. This is Mark Carrier, not the Chicago Bears Mark Carrier, who would come a year later, But this is the wide receiver who was a third-round draft pick out of Nicholls State in Louisiana. He spent 6 years with the Buccaneers, a couple with Cleveland, and then 4 with the Panthers. His best year was 1989, where he had 86 catches for an impressive 1,422 yards with 9 touchdowns, and he made the Pro Bowl. He ended up his career with almost 9,000 yards receiving on 569 catches with 48 touchdowns. So that's quite impressive. And again, another error card here. If you look on the back of this, that is not Mark Carrier. That is wide receiver Bruce Hill, who I will be mentioning in just a moment. So the correct Mark Carrier copy is right here. That's the actual one. So speaking of Bruce Hill, this is his rookie card as well. So here's another back of Bruce along with the back of the Mark Carrier card. So Bruce Hill had a great 1988 season. That was his best year. He had over 1,000 yards. And we can actually see that here in his Topps 1,000 Yard Club card. He had 58 catches for 1,040 yards and 9 touchdowns that year. He was a draft pick, a 4th-round pick back in '87 out of Arizona State. He only played 5 years, and then he was out of the league. I'm not sure if he had an injury or what, but kind of a short career, but a great 1988 season. Next up is Paul Gruber. This is his rookie card. He was the 4th pick in 1988 out of Wisconsin. And he played in and started 183 games over a 12-year career. 2-time All-Pro. He was an All-Rookie in '88, and he's part of the Bucs Ring of Honor. Next up, we've got Broderick Thomas. He was the 6th pick of the 1989 draft. He was an All-American out of Nebraska and had a 10-year career. And I mentioned this once before, but he is the nephew of Chicago Bear great Mike Singletary. Broderick Thomas's best year came in 1991 when he had 174 tackles, which tied a Buccaneers record, 11 quarterback sacks, 7 forced fumbles, which led the NFL, and he made a Pro Bowl. He played in 144 games with the Buccaneers and had 48 quarterback sacks in total. The last Buccaneer here is Rob Taylor, rookie. Now, the only reason I'm including this is just because he has a very interesting story. He was drafted by the Eagles in 1982, but was cut in training camp and went on to play for the Chicago Blitz in 1983. And then he was out of football completely, but he went to Tampa in 1986 with his wife on vacation. And while he was there, he went to the Buccaneers training facility, the team facility, to ask for a tryout. And they actually agreed to give it to him. And they were so impressed with his tryout that he signed with Tampa Bay and went on to play 8 years with the team, many of those years as a starter. So kind of a cool story, for someone who, thinks you're out of football to be able to have a successful career when most people probably counted you out. Now the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons, unfortunately, went 3-13, but that was, a rebuilding team. They struggled with Marion Campbell as coach. Now here's a very young Marion Campbell. I actually have an older card of his. So this was his second go-round as the Falcons head coach, and he coached them once before from 83 to 85, but it was such a tough year. They had 2 players during the season, offensive tackle Ralph Norwood and tight end Brad Beckerman passed away during the year. Campbell ended up retiring after the 12th game, and unfortunately just, it wasn't a great year for the team. One of the solid players for Atlanta during that time period was Scott Case. This is his rookie card, but he actually started as a second-round pick out of Oklahoma in 1984. In 1988, he led the NFL in interceptions with 10, which is quite impressive, and made the Pro Bowl. Those 10 interceptions are a franchise record. And in 1990, he moved to free safety, and he had 170 tackles along with 3 interceptions. And in 91, he had another 162 tackles. So he really handled that change quite well. He actually won a Super Bowl 30 with Dallas in his final season after the 1995 season. Next up, Chris Miller. He was the 13th pick in 1987 out of Oregon. He had a 10-year NFL career, with his best season being in 1991, where he made the Pro Bowl. Flair Ultra actually made a performance highlight subset of Miller, and people kind of thought he was maybe going to have quite a great career. Unfortunately, he ended up going to the Rams after 7 years, but in his second year with the Rams, he had 5 concussions over 14 months, and he had to retire in 1995. He did actually try to make a comeback in 1999 with Denver. He played 3 games, but had another concussion and had to retire again. So never really fully met his potential, but definitely had some talent. Next up is running back John Settle. This is his rookie card. He was an undrafted free agent out of Appalachian State in 1987. He had a 7-year NFL career, his best year being in 1988 when he made the Pro Bowl after having a 1,000-yard season, and he also scored 7 touchdowns that year. Very, very good season, and he became the first undrafted player to rush for 1,000 yards in a season in NFL history. He became a backup for Washington and won a Super Bowl ring. He was a running back coach for a few teams, the Panthers and the Browns, and he also coached with the Ravens, and currently he is the running backs coach at Kentucky. Next up, we've got primetime Neon Deion Sanders. He had an amazing 14-year NFL career, which began after being drafted by the Falcons with the 5th pick in 1989. He was a 2-time All-American at Florida State. And he also was very notable for his success as a baseball player. And he just, he had that primetime image that was very, very popular. He really knew how to market himself. And he was notable with that baseball career. So shout out to Zach and Porter. They gave me this 1989 Star Deion Sanders card, part of his in his New York uniform. And then I had this Neon Deion Sanders 1990 Upper Deck. And Zach and Porter also sent me this really cool Topps Deion Sanders. And my only other baseball card of his was this with the Atlanta Braves, because he did go on to play with the Braves for a little while as well while he was there in Atlanta. So he was the only player, or is the only player, to have both played in a World Series and a Super Bowl. He played in the 92 World Series with the Braves, and then he won a Super Bowl with the 49ers. And in 1989, he hit and this is the year these cards came out, he hit a Major League Baseball home run and scored a touchdown in the same NFL week, and is the only player to do that. In 1990, there was the Bo and Primetime show where Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders were playing against each other. In one of those games, Bo Jackson actually hit 3 home runs. So Sanders said that he loved baseball, but he has a famous quote where he said, "Football is my wife and baseball is my mistress." But anyway, great Hall of Fame career. Defensive player of the year in 94, 8-time All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowl, 90s All-Decade team, 100th anniversary all-time team, 2-time Super Bowl champ, and he's the current head coach at Jackson State, which is where my favorite player of all time, Walter Payton, went to school. So the last team for today is the 1989 Kansas City Chiefs, who in 1989 went 8-7-1. They were coached by the late Marty Schottenheimer. I actually have his Boston Patriots card from back in the day. He played a few years in the NFL. And so just of note, Hall of Famer, this would be Mike Webster. He came out of retirement to play very briefly with the Chiefs. And he's not a Hall of Famer, but I always loved Ron Jaworski. And just, his first card, I think, is 1976. And so to see a card in 1989 of somebody playing still, he and Webster were two of those guys who just had been around a long time. They also had an All-Pro card of Darren Cherry, just a great player. And one rookie card was Dan Saliamua. That was his only rookie card that year. He was a 7th-round pick in 87 out of Arizona State and had a 12-year career. He was drafted by the Lions, where he spent 2 years before going over to the Chiefs for another 8 years. He was an All-Pro in 1990, and he also made the Pro Bowl in 95. His final 2 years were with the Seahawks, and he holds a Chiefs record with 17 fumble recoveries, but just a very, very talented nose tackle. Next up is Kevin Ross, 7th-round pick in 84. He had a 14-year career. He's currently the defensive back coach of the Buccaneers. But in 1990, he was an All-Pro. He also made a couple Pro Bowls and is part of the Chiefs Hall of Fame. He also was voted by the NFL Network back in 2008 as one of the top 10 all-time best cornerback tandems, along with Albert Lewis. Another great defensive player, Neil Smith. He was actually the number 2 pick of the draft back in 88 out of Nebraska. The Chiefs had the number 3 pick, but they really wanted to get him, so they traded up from the Lions to get that number 2 spot. He spent 9 years with the Chiefs, 3 with Denver, and his final year with the Chargers. He led the NFL in sacks in 1993 with 15, and he was a 4-time All-Pro. He's part of the 100 quarterback sack club, and he also had 30 forced fumbles. So just a very good player. He won 2 Super Bowls with the Broncos near the end of his career. All right, so I had to mention this one. So Jack Del Rio, this is his rookie card. He was a 3rd-round pick in '85 out of USC to the Saints, where he was an all-rookie, but he was traded to Kansas City in '87. And if you remember, '87 is the year where they had the strike, and the teams were having a lot of other players that were not part of the NFL come into play. And Jack Del Rio and his teammates would picket outside Arrowhead Stadium, and they were watching for replacement players and kind of giving them a piece of their mind. And anyway, Chiefs legend Otis Taylor showed up, and Del Rio mistakenly thought he was one of those replacement players and got into an altercation with Otis Taylor and ended up assaulting Otis Taylor. Now keep in mind, Otis Taylor at that time was 45 years old. He had been out of the league for 12 years, and Taylor did press charges on Del Rio. They settled out of court, and he was eventually cut in 1989. Went on to the Cowboys and Vikings, and he made a Pro Bowl in '94. He's been the head coach of the Jaguars and the Raiders, and he's currently the defensive coordinator in Washington. Last up, one of my all-time favorite players, Derrick Thomas. This is his rookie card. He was born on New Year's Day in 1967. DT was born in Florida. His father was a B-52 pilot named Robert, who died during a mission in Vietnam, which was called Operation Linebacker 2 back in 1972. Derrick was only 5 years old at the time. He went on to become one of the best pass-rushing linebackers in NFL history, and I very vividly remember a game in 1990 when he sacked quarterback Dave Craig 7 times when he played against the Seahawks. He was the number 4 pick in '89 and had 10 sacks his rookie year and then 20 sacks in 1990. So altogether he had 30 sacks in 2 years. He recorded double-digit sacks in 7 of his 11 seasons. Unfortunately, Derrick Thomas, after the 1999 season, the final game of '99, they lost to the Raiders in overtime. Had they won, they would have made the playoffs, but instead, they were out of the playoffs. And Derrick Thomas, just 37 days after that last game, had passed away. On January 23rd, 2000, Thomas and 2 passengers were driving to Kansas City International Airport to watch. They were going to take a flight to St. Louis to watch the NFC Championship game from the Rams and the Buccaneers. And there was a snowstorm, and Thomas was driving too fast for the weather conditions. He was not wearing a seatbelt. And unfortunately, he lost control of the vehicle and crashed. Thomas and 1 passenger were both ejected from the vehicle. Neither of them were wearing seatbelts. The passenger died instantly. Thomas was taken to the hospital, and it was discovered that he was paralyzed from the waist down. Incidentally, the passenger who was wearing a seatbelt walked away uninjured. But on February 8th, he was being moved from his hospital bed to a wheelchair, and he commented to his mother that he wasn't feeling well, and just moments later, unfortunately, he passed away. He had a massive blood clot in his legs, and it traveled up to his lungs. But he was just very big in the community with charity work on literacy and education. He had a great career, the 1989 Defensive Rookie of the Year, 1993 Man of the Year, 9-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All-Pro, part of the College Football and Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was inducted in 2000, and his number 58 is retired. He has 126.5 sacks, just a great player. And he actually sent me a TTM when I was a kid. He sent me a few autographed cards, so I always was a big fan and appreciated that. Okay guys, thanks for watching. One more video to go and we'll be done with the series. Thank you.